Hello, I'm in Cornwall and I'm exploring this wild, rugged coastline. Now, in typical British summer fashion, it's been pretty miserable so far today. It's rained all morning, and though it's starting to brighten up a little bit now, it's still pretty windy, which is why I'm having a shout. Might dry my hair out a little bit, but it's going to make pieces to camera quite difficult, so most of this video I'm going to have to voice over back in the studio, as if I've got a studio.
This is Treyarnon Bay, just down the coast from Padstow, and is a fine example of just some of the diversity of habitats you can find in a West Country coastal environment, with a sandy beach, sheer cliffs, and lots of rock pools, some of which are massive.
Now I came prepared to explore the coastline properly. Got my bucket, got an extendable net. Let's see what we can find.
There wasn't much in these sandy pools, apart from this half-dead jellyfish. Interesting, yes, but perhaps a bit depressing. I did see a crab, but it ran off. In the rockier pools, there were some more interesting things, which weren't going anywhere fast, like this beadlet anemone, Actinia equina. With 6 rings of tentacles, they reach into the water to catch passing prey, like small fish, crabs and shrimps, which they sting and pass to the gastrovascular cavity in the middle, which acts as their mouth, as well as their anus.
Come on, Peter. Gastrovascular.
If you're in the mood for long words, those purple beads around the outside are called acrorhagi, which they use to sting other anemones if they get too close. In some of the deeper pools, there were some decent sized fish, but the rain on the surface made them quite hard to see, and they were even harder to catch. This little chap was an easier target, so I got him in the bucket for a closer look. Now, growing up, I knew all these little fish in rock pools as blennies, but there are quite a few species that they might be. This one, I think, is a sculpin. Sounds like a Pokemon, doesn't it? Skulking in these pools, you'll often see some sea snails, like this lined top shell. Similar to the terrestrial snails in your garden, they move about on one muscular foot. Yes, it's called a foot, with a gorgeous coiled shell for protection. They're grazers, feeding on algae that grows on the rock surface, though they usually do this at night. Unlike the hermaphroditic land snails, these guys are dioecious, meaning they are separate guys and girls. But you can't tell them apart without a close, personal look inside them, and to be honest, I didn't like to ask. This one's on a bit of a mission anyway. Look at him go!
Right down by the shoreline here, the rock face is covered in these beds of mussels. They're quite difficult when you're walking around barefoot, they're quite sharp, and I don't want to stand on them anyway, because these aren't living, they're alive. They're not doing much right now, but if we were to see them in the water, we'd see that they'd open up and extend little feeding tendrils out, and they'll catch little bits of whatever's floating past, cherry bakewells and all sorts. It comes by in the water. But right now, when the tide's out, these guys just close up, try and retain that moisture, and sit pretty until the water comes back.
Amongst the mussels, and just as uncomfortable to walk on, are lots of barnacles. These are filter feeders too, with a rich history. Charles Darwin himself studied these guys for 8 years when gathering evidence for his theory of evolution by natural selection. He wanted to make absolutely sure before he put anything in writing. And centuries ago, these were thought to be eggs, from which hatched the barnacle goose. Further back from the shore, the rock faces here at Treyarnon Bay look like something from the early Earth, or perhaps another world entirely. You can see here the path that the water takes as it runs down the rock face. And everywhere the water goes, life springs up. Life finds a way. Now, for a species that looks slightly more exotic than it actually is. Indeed, it's a bird you might well have seen on a beach near you. This is an oyster catcher, who I'd obviously upset as I walked across the pools. That's no real surprise though. They're easily upset. Any excuse to shout their mouth off, they can be quite a noisy bird. More often than not, you'll hear these guys before you see them. As if the oyster catcher hadn't made it clear enough, the weather soon turned, so I took the hint and headed home. It's harder than it looks, this filmmaking stuff. Still, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, let me know in the comments. If you haven't, well, try the other runs, maybe they're better. I'm still learning, and I appreciate you coming along for the ride. See you next time.